Hello everyone and welcome. I'm Kawaii Britt, and today we're going to be continuing on with my October series. This month, the videos will all be Halloween themed, and instead of verbalizing the steps I take to make my creations, I'm going to be sharing different spooky stories. My stories, my town stories, and other stories that just interest me. I'm aware that many of you may be skeptics, so if that's the case, I hope you enjoy the craft I'm making. And for those of you interested in history, haunts, and just plain spooky things, I hope you enjoy taking this adventure in the series with me. Today I'm going to be sharing with you the grim story of the Accomac Inn. The Accomac Inn is located in Pelham Township in York, Pennsylvania. It boasts that it is a perfect place for a quiet, intimate dinner, with a beautiful view of the Susquehanna River. It also hosts some uninvited guests from the past, bound to roam the land after a gruesome murder. The Accomac Inn had its beginnings in 1722 when a 200-acre tract called the Partners Adventure was first surveyed. 10 years later, a patent was granted to Philip Sung and Thomas Brown for this land. This land was highly fought over by Maryland and Pennsylvania. The battle between the two states was not settled until 1763 when Mason and Dixon completed a survey for the Royal Court in London, which put this plot of land in Pennsylvania. For years, this land would be used as an unofficial river crossing into the town of Marietta. In 1759, Philip Sung sold his half of the land to James Anderson, who owned all of the land connected to this tract. Anderson ran a ferry along the river and in 1742 received an unofficial charter from Thomas Penn, William Penn's son, for 35 acres on the west side of the river, and by 1775 the Accomac Inn had been built. James Anderson's ferry was what the Accomac Inn was known as during this time. During the Revolutionary period, many dignitaries passed through the inn, and it was visited on more than one occasion by Marquis de Lafayette. In 1812 to 1813, crews erected a large wooden-covered bridge just a few miles downstream at Wrightsville, which offered a link between Wrightsville and Columbia. The ferry service suffered as a result, but remained in operation sporadically through the mid-19th century. In the 1840s, Dr. Jacob Glatz purchased the ferry company and the surrounding property. In the late 1850s, entrepreneur John Knoll leased the operation of Glatz Ferry. He expanded the attractions by turning the sawmill into a pavilion, which he rented for picnics, weddings, and other social gatherings. By late June 1863, the Confederate Army had invaded Pennsylvania. After capturing York, the rebels planned to take the state capital, Harrisburg, and possibly Philadelphia. To get there, they needed to cross the Susquehanna River at Wrightsville. Pennsylvania militiamen from Columbia on the Lancaster County side of the river vowed to block the Confederate advance. Union troops retreating from York joined them, as did a company of African-American militiamen, the first black troops from Camp William Penn. When Confederate Brigadier General John Brown Gordon arrived on June 28th with his troops, the Federals were waiting in their entrenchments. The rebels opened with artillery fire, and the Union position rapidly became unattainable. The Federals decided to retreat to Columbia and blow up a section of the over-mile-long bridge behind them, denying the rebels access to Lancaster. The explosion failed to destroy the bridge, so the order to burn it was given. As the Confederates surged forward, the bridge erupted in flames. Gordon's men worked for hours to extinguish the blaze. They kept Wrightsville from going up in smoke, but the bridge was destroyed. Gordon's brigade was recalled to York the next day. The Pennsylvania militia had saved Lancaster. About a mile north of the inn, area residents discovered a body of a Confederate soldier along the riverbank. There is much speculation on his identity and reason for his drowning. Research suggests that he was a member of the 17th Virginia Cavalry, which was operating just upstream at York Haven, and engaged in a brief firefight with the retreating 20th Pennsylvania Volunteer Militia. A stone grave marker was set for him, but it was washed away in 2011 when a tropical storm ravaged the region. In 1864, the Coyle family took ownership of the area and the inn. By 1875, they had named it the Accomac Inn. The name is said to come from the Native American word Accomac, which means the other side, as the area had been originally inhabited by the Susquehannock and the Nanticoke tribes. John, his wife, and his son, John Coyle Jr., ran the inn. In 1882, to help with the workload, they hired a young woman named Emily Myers. Emily quickly learned that Miss Coyle had arthritis, so she worked hard to quickly finish her task and tried to lift the burden from the older woman as well. The entire family quickly came to care for Emily, but John Coyle Jr. may have cared for her a little too much. The young John Coyle Jr., or Johnny, was said to have been a bit slow. His actions often seemed very childish. After Emily started working for the family, he became smitten with her. However, Emily had no time for Johnny. After a series of marriage proposals and rejections, Johnny decided that if he couldn't have Emily as his love, then nobody would. Early in the morning on May 30th, 1882, Emily went to work in the barn milking the cows. Johnny found her in the barn and demanded that she run away with him and marry him. Emily refused. Johnny couldn't take the rejection any longer. He pulled out a revolver and shot Emily right through the heart. She fell dead instantly. He then turned the gun on himself, but the wound was not serious and he survived. Johnny was tried and convicted for the murder of Emily Myers. His defense built a case claiming insanity. His mother even testified to Johnny's mental instability and childish behavior. The first conviction was overturned, and a second trial was then held in Gettysburg. He was once again convicted, despite his testimony about his mental instability, and he received a verdict of death by hanging for the crime. He was then hung in Gettysburg. His mother came to claim his body. She placed it on the back of a wagon and took him home to the inn. She and her husband laid him to his final resting place under an apple tree about 50 feet from the inn. A stone marker sits at the spot to mark the grave. Shortly after, the Coyles put the inn up for sale. In 1889, James Duffy purchased the inn. The popularity of the place grew. They held dances and flotted excursions on the river. The inn became a social part of the community. The inn was also famous for its chicken and waffles. By 1909, after Ford had invented the Model T, the inn became more of a restaurant with people being able to travel to and from it in one day. In 1915, Norman Pickle took possession of the Accomac Inn. However, on May 16, 1935, the Accomac Inn burned down. Norman Pickle vowed to rebuild it, and he did. Mr. Pickle rebuilt the inn using the original stone from the building and new stone from the old Whitmer Bridge in Lancaster County. 4 months later, the inn opened once again. In 1952, Mr. and Miss Morton Noss purchased the inn a year after the death of Mr. Pickle. The Noss family sold the inn to Vance and Vivian Lehman in 1960. The Lehmans sold the inn to the current owner, H. Douglas Campbell, in 1971. Throughout the years, the building has become known locally as being haunted. For decades, workers and patrons at the Accomac Inn have reported the feeling of being watched. Some have even had much closer encounters. It is said that Emily also haunts the Accomac Inn. Her presence is especially felt late at night when you can hear soft music and a woman's voice in the building. Johnny's spirit still roams the Accomac as well. He is said to be seen by many different people. Johnny loves to play poltergeist games like breaking dishes, slamming doors, and hiding objects inside the inn. One waitress who worked there in 1976 said she had seen strange flashing lights, loud banging, and the intercom ringing when the building was empty. Another waitress reports that one night, while walking back from the empty dining room, she saw a man sitting at a table alone with his head in his hands. She walked to where the man was sitting, but there was no one there. A pastry chef tells another story. She says she was working early in the morning one day when she heard someone enter the building. She assumed it was another employee, but instead she found herself greeting the ghost of a young man. The figure vanished right in front of her eyes. The same chef also reports the feeling of being watched in the walk-in fridge, only to turn around to the face of the same young man. Ghost hunters have had their instruments malfunction inside the inn, and one group even recorded what they believe is the sound of a young woman pleading for help. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this October's theme. If you did, make sure to hit the subscribe button up there to be notified when my next video comes out. You can also follow me on Twitter and Instagram. Those links are located in the description for you. I also stream. Check me out on Twitch on Tuesdays and Thursdays at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time and Saturdays at 9:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. My Twitch is also in the description. If you made it this far, hit the like button if you haven't already. And let me know in the comments, would you be interested in hearing more of my ghost stories in the future? Thanks again for watching, everyone. Happy haunting!